Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Gannibal, Season 1, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we start off with Daigo talking to the man who's gotten his face eaten off. We got his backstory a little bit, learning that it happened to him at a very, very young age. Him and his mom ran away from Kuge Village, but the fact is, after she died, he never really learned much about her past, we don't know what her relation was to the village. Was she someone that just came here to settle down? Was she kind of born in the village? Whatever her circumstances were, a lot of that, I think, history is kind of going to him, because we don't know how old he was, but he seemed fairly young, because his mom's the one that ran away from him. Either she kind of knew what the deal was going to be, and then at the last second, I can't do this, and that's why her son is luckily, maybe that's why he survived, it seems like every other instance, the kid was most likely eaten all the way through, so maybe she's the reason why, like I said, either that was a last minute thing of she had no idea what was going on, or she did, and she had a change of heart, and maybe that's also why she didn't want to talk about her past, because of just the things that she's done in the past, things she's been a part of, maybe she's been a part of eating other people's children, but when it came to her own, couldn't really, because I'm assuming that man is the one who gets to eat first. I mean, I assume they all take part in it, but it may be because even the man with the eaten face was I don't know who it was. I saw these people surrounding me, but he just felt someone eating his face, but he doesn't, because it was did he say 18 or 19 years ago or something like that? That's a long time, and to be so young and have something so traumatic happen, I can only assume it was that man. And like I said, I don't know if it all goes to him, or just maybe he gets the first few bites or whatever, and then they split whatever's left after that man eats, or it could be all the children go towards that man. Maybe that's what it is too. So, but there's not too much you can really tell Daigo other than that, but it's he worked alongside Mr. Kano to kind of reveal all of this, but Daigo has no way to get in contact with this guy, can't get any further information, so obviously he's walking on pins and needles when it comes to the village, because everyone, as even Mr. Sabo says, he's oh yeah, everyone knows everything, and he points towards Daigo's crotch. So I guess that's supposed to be in reference to him and his wife making up and having sexy time, because even later on, Daigo's the mother effer knows too much. There's got to be a bug in here. How do they know so much? It's well, it could also just be without you realizing it, there probably is someone nearby just straight. Maybe there's, I think there is some bugs in their house in the listening device, or is it just someone, they probably do it very low tech where it's it's actually a person listening, But it's everyone knows everything in this village, so they're all up in his business. Oh, you're supposed to be coming to the practice for this festival. Where were you? You can't do anything, because they've already had issues with him, so they're definitely keeping a close eye on him and his family. Because Yuki's amalgamating a lot better than Daigo is, because Daigo seems like he's too much of a fighter. He's always kind of resisted everything in this town to begin with. They had extra reason to. I mean, you would think he would kind of divulge a lot of this to Yuki, but I guess he doesn't want to scare her, because later on he's talking to I'm blanking on this, it was I'm probably going to butcher it. It's Muchika. I'm probably butchering that, but he's the new, well, he's not the new priest, he's the current priest's son, but he's taking over because his father's retiring. I don't know if there's going to be something more to that or not, because we do see him leaving the house at one point in time, and you kind of hear someone wheezing he's sick. So I don't know if there's anything beyond that, but he seems to try and be on Daigo's side of hey, let's meet secretly. I'm going to basically tell you, you need to leave this village because there's some crazy stuff happening here. You need to protect your family. But for him, it's yeah, Mashiro is happy for the first time since everything went down, as we learned about previously in the past. She smiled, and she's happy, and doesn't want to take that away. And it's is that all that's motivating you here, Daigo? Or is it also because there's a mystery here that, hey, these people started some shit with you, and you're oh, I'm going to be the one to resolve it, because I know there's something going on here. And it's just, he's got that, hero complex, but I think it's also like it goes beyond that because he can be very aggro. But I think it's just that hero complex of I got to see something through that I started. I mean, because it wasn't even him that started it; it was Mr. Kano, and now it's like right, they came and attacked you. They're kind of threatening you. You know, like even if you leave the village, it's like someone else would fall prey to this, and even then, who's to say they'd leave you alone? I mean, even when you left the village, you still ended up getting attacked. So. But also, I think maybe it's also the element of, because I figured he was telling the priest, like, no, everything's good here. My daughter's so happy here. I'm sure he's also saying that because he doesn't know who he can fully trust. So he doesn't want to sit here. Even though this guy's like, oh, you should be wary of this village, he's still reluctant to open up to the guy completely because I don't trust you. I don't know if you're going to run your mouth off back to Mr. Sabu. Like, who knows if that bastard's listening to. So I have to be careful about my word. I mean, especially Daigo's like in that, because obviously he loves and cares about Mashiro, but their relationship has always been complicated, but especially after that whole incident with do forgive me because it's been a hot minute. It's been a couple months, in fact, since I saw the previous episode. I'm getting to this super, super late, so I do apologize, but like the pedophile friend of hers, like that guy, that whole incident, like... that obviously created the trauma for her, but even then, like, the gap between her and Daigo's gotten even bigger because of that, obviously, as we learned, and I think he's trying to walk on eggshells, because it's like, anytime she looks at him, like, when he was tossing in place, and she was just staring at him, because it's just a reminder of, like, how aggro her dad can get, like, she's seen that darker side of him, she's seen the good that he can be, and I think Yuki's seen it too, but I don't think she's seen, like, how little unhinged Daigo can get, which in the end, they're going to use a lot of this behavior. Like, if he has a Mr. Kano incident of him disappearing or something like that, they'll use this to justify it. Like, oh yeah, he went crazy, blah, 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 blah. Like, because they made it seem like Kano just, like, left on his own and just disappeared because he was stressed out, going crazy, yada, yada, yada. But that look in Mashiro's face, it's just like, you could tell he's disappointed in himself of like, I'm doing all this for your sake, but also at the same time, I'm scaring you, I'm doing more harm than good, I'm sorry, type of situation, I think. But he ends up meeting up with someone, and it's Utada. He's a journalist, who got contacted by the man with the eaten face, and he told him about cannibalism here in Japan, and specifically one village, and he didn't necessarily believe him, but he's like, the moment I saw its face, any good journalist would be like, I need to find out the story behind that. So even he was reluctant to believe in any of that, but he's actually the one that got him and Mr. Kano in contact with each other. So he acted, the guy with the eaten face was the middle person, from connecting the two of them together, and they worked together, because it turns out Kuge Village has a very above average rate of stillbirths. It's like, yeah, this school, elementary school, has like 10 kids in it. It's like, is it really that possible for like one a year for that many stillbirths? It's like, it just seems, so it's like, right. Because even the guy with the eaten face was kind of like, yeah, I didn't have a birth certificate, but it's because I think other kids are like that too, because it makes it easier. Because like, oh, if there's no record of this kid being born when they disappear, it's like, oh, you don't have to worry about covering up any paper trails. So, but then it became the question of, well, how do they fake the paperwork? And even Utada was like, I actually have no idea. And I'm like, they must have someone powerful enough to kind of help fake that for them on the more official side of things. That's the only way I figured you'd be able to cover up on that front. No, it wasn't that. There was something else. Maybe I'm misremembering. I could have sworn like there was something. I can't remember how. Because Daigo asked him something, and Utada was like, I don't remember if it was that or was it something else. He was like, there was something specific. He was like, yeah, I don't know how they do that. It's like, it can't be the faking the birth certificate stuff. I feel like it was something else, and I'm just conflating it with the birth stuff, because I just said that, like, there is no birth certificate, so why would they need to fake any of that records-wise if there's nothing to record in the first place, technically speaking? And I'm like, I don't remember what it was. I swear, I'm fairly certain it was something else, but I can't remember off the top of my head now. We also know he's not the one who called Mr. Kano, because the last time he talked to Mr. Kano was like a month before he disappeared. So it's like, okay, Mr. Kano received a call before he disappeared. So if it wasn't you and it wasn't the man with the eaten face, who was it? Now they're like, interestingly enough, there must be a whistleblower in the village, which later on you're kind of like, could it be Kaneko? But I'm like, I don't think so. Because the person that immediately came to my mind, and I just get that vibe from him, but it might not be at all. I kind of wonder, is it going to be Kisuke? Like, he's always been an interesting person amongst, like, the Gato family, that it just seemed like, especially, like, his relationship with Daigo and, like, how he's kind of interacted with Daigo, and obviously, like, pushback he's gotten from the rest of the family on how well, obviously, we know that kind of got settled a couple episodes ago about the division of, like, how Kisuke wants to handle that versus how, like, other people want to. I don't know, like, there's just something about Kisuke that doesn't seem like he's all about it, but the responsibility is being thrust upon him. But, I mean, it feels like Kaneko seems like she's, like, the obvious choice, but because it's so obvious, it feels like it should be Kisuke. But, like I said, I don't know. He's who I immediately thought of. I was like, because Mr. Sabu was like, oh yeah, this is my daughter. I'm like, had we ever met? Maybe, once again, it's been months since I've seen the first 4 episodes. Because I know there was, like, a big gap in between, like, some of those episodes regardless. But, yeah, it's been, like, the last upload was, like, 8 months ago at the time you're recording this. So, I think, yeah. Either way, I'm like, then who could it have... Then when would we have ever met Kaneko before now? I don't remember her. But, I mean, maybe it's because, like, maybe she's always been there, but have just never really had much dialogue. But when she went up the Mashiro, I was like, oh, that seems a little unnerving. But then she was hugging her and sniffing her. Because at first I was like, oh, you lost a child, didn't you? Because you're calling her an angel and everything, but you're smelling her. I'm like, are you trying to, like, are you going to taste her? But then the moment Yuki came over, she was super apologetic. I was like, right. Because the way Mr. Sabo was looking at her, then, like, the marks on her back, it's like she's being beaten up and abused. And you're like, oh. And she was like, yeah, Gin took my daughter. And it's like, yeah, she was 3. You said she wasn't breathing, but I know that she was. I saw her. Did she ever say specifically as her daughter, or did you just say child? I don't remember. But anyway, just to play safe, I'll just refer to the baby as a child. But I think she said daughter, but I don't remember. But it's like, yeah, Gin took my child, and you're trying to gaslight me into believing I'm crazy. So... And just out in public, like, he's yanking her, because everyone's in on it. Everyone knows what that's all about. And Yuki's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. But she's like, oh, my daughter, she's crazy. Don't listen to her. And it's like smacking her and stuff. You're like, Jesus. So she ends up telling Daigo later on about it. Daigo wants to meet with Kaneko, but Mr. Sabu's making that impossible. It's like, right, my daughter's crazy. I guess your wife filled you in on my daughter's crazy ideas and yada, yada, yada. She lost her child, and basically she's still suffering through that pain, coming up with these outlandish stories. Really quickly, circling back to Utada, I thought something was interesting, because Daigo was like, oh yeah, basically these no-tell hotels or no secret hotels or whatever. He was like, I've never been in one with a man. And then the Utada was like, oh, I have. And I was like, is that implying what I think it is? And he was like, oh yeah, he hires a sex worker to kick it with him. No, kick it. I said kick it with him, but it's like, okay, I was like, that's exactly what I thought he was kind of implying before. I don't know if that's going to end up being significant or not, like whether they're going to use that to trap him, like, oh, he hires someone but someone else shows up, or what. Like, it just feels like that storyline, like, it just, I mean, maybe it could just be like just adding a little more flavor to the character, kind of expanding a little bit about him, about why he frequents these type of hotels and stuff. But it could also just, it feels like that's going to be plot relevant, and either the person he's meeting up with is selling him out, or that person gets removed and someone gets planted there just to remove Utada from the equation because they end up finding out about him. I don't know. It just feels like, oh, that's such an interesting element to throw in there, and it, especially because it was like at the end of Daigo and his conversation. So like I said, it could just be like a little splash of flavoring for the character, or it could end up being plot relevant. But Daigo ends up getting Yuki to try and approach Kaneko by herself. And she even was like around like, oh, these mothers who are hanging around their kids playing. And it's just like those bitches, they're doing that. They're purposely making their kid like making sure that their kids play around me just to kind of rub it in. I wonder how many of them would be okay with their children being like, maybe it has to be within a certain amount of time. Like anyone that's older at this point in time, maybe they're off the chopping block because like even her, well, because it was 3 years ago, but I don't know if that expressly means like whether her child was an infant or not. Because the man with the eaten all face, it's like, it seemed like, I mean, at least by his mom carrying him, either he was like a very young child or he was like infant-ish. So I don't know. Because I'm like, maybe at a certain point they just don't bother with the child. Maybe if it's like an infant child, they'll do it. Because there was that whole conversation too about like, rituals and sacrifices to the gods. Because basically it was like in this, because he was talking about, the priest dude was talking about how the Goto family and the villagers, why they have beef, is that long ago they used to be the majority landowners, and the villagers basically had to borrow some land from the Goto family, but it was like not enough going, or like there was nothing to really farm, like there was the soil was uninhabitable and couldn't really foster any like plants or anything or any crops, and so they killed children just to mitigate the amount of mouths you needed to feed. But Daigo's kind of like, is that all they did? He's like, oh, what are you suggesting? They killed and ate the children? That's crazy. And it's like, you're the one kind of bringing a lot of this up, and it just, that's so interesting. You take one step forward, like, oh, you're on Daigo's side, but you take steps back where you're like, Daigo, you're crazy. I think that's why he's kind of flip-flopping and wondering if you can trust him or not. But because even later on, it's like, oh yeah, like they also blame Gin for being responsible for taking the children. Some mothers have claimed that because Gin was like the general midwife for all these homes, and it's like that would give her access to these children to take them. But Daigo's like, yeah, there's no way she would do that. And it's like I said, he has to walk on eggshells around everyone in this place. Understandable. You once again, you still don't fully know who to trust, but he's believing in all of this, knowing it's real. But it's like, because that was another element to it that they started suggesting that maybe Mr. Kano had found where the children were being held, and that's why he got killed. And maybe that has to do with what we kept cutting back to, where at one point, it's not Daisuke, Kisuke, as well as another person, is feeding that man. It looks like a piece of meat, but we're like, we don't know if that's like some of the children there's like slowly feeding to him over time. Because initially, you're like, if they're not children of a certain age, does that mean, because it feel like Mashiro would be like the obvious thing of like, obvious choice for like a sacrifice. That's why I'm like, maybe they make the children have to be on the younger side, plus that draw too much attention. But once again, they could easily frame this and blame, like, if anything that happens to Yuki or Mashiro, blame it on Daigo, going like, oh, he went insane and crazy and did something to his family, it's all on him. Definitely see that being like the end result of this. Who knows how this is going to play out. Once again, I'm getting to the super late, so yes, the entire show is like out and done, but still, or at least the season is. I don't know if the show's going beyond this. It is interesting, speaking of like that man being fed, as well as like the Gato family, like they're in front of like it's like, oh mom, Kisuke's going to be the one kind of running the family now. He'll lead the family in a very back, because everyone's like, you know, in position and kneeling down. There was one particular person that got up before things were like fully done. I'm like, who was that and why did they get up? I was like, that's interesting. Not less that's because there was once again the guy who was the second person. I think he has a name, and once again it's just been so long I forgot. But he was the dude that was like with the beard, like scratching his beard while that man was eating the food. And I'm like, is he supposed to be the inside person? Like I said, my money's still mainly on Kisuke, but I'm a little more open minded to it being Kaneko, but it could easily, like I said, be someone else as well. But speaking of Kaneko, after her conversation with Yuki, which we learned, I don't think that came up previously about Yuki and Daigo, that Yuki had a stalker, and Daigo, once he found out about it, he took on the case as a detective and ended up like staying outside of her place to kind of make sure she was okay. She was like, I started wondering who was who was the stalker after all. But she's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, he made me feel safe. And she's like, he will protect you and he'll help you too if you like tell him what's going on. And at the end of the episode, we see Kaneko show up at their house. But her dad does call someone on the phone to probably try and track her down, being like, oh, I know exactly where she is. So the question then becomes, like, what are they going to do? Is, like, Daigo and the family going to hide her? And be like, oh, yeah, no, she didn't stop by here, which, if they find out you're lying, that'd be a whole issue. Once again, especially if they had the place bugged, but who knows? Like I said, maybe it might be a lot more low-tech, and it's like, no, it's just someone listening. Either way, some very, very interesting developments. I'm really curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.